I'm here to tell you that what this world needs right now is to show some global solidarity. This world might seem to be crumbling all around us, but there are always ways that you can help. Brother Malik Rahim from Algiers, New Orleans, has been an activist all his life. Leader of the Louisiana chapter of the Black Panthers back in the 70s, co-founder of Common Ground Relief, an environmental justice organization formed in the aftermath of the Hurricane Katrina. He was a leader in the anti-death penalty pilgrimage for life and the successful campaign to free the Angola Three.
I believe we are at a crossroad in human existence. As whether we preserve life as we know it, or we sit idly by and allow it to be squandered away. What type of legacy we gonna leave to our children and to our grandchildren? We can't go on like this. This planet cannot go on like this. Will they love us or will they curse us for leaving them this type of legacy? You know, the fight injustice anywhere is the fight injustice everywhere. Every man, woman, and child who have been blessed to get involved. Get involved in your community.
Thanksgiving Day, November 28th, 1986. Thanks for the wild turkey and passenger pigeons destined to be shit out through wholesome American guts. Thanks for a continent to despoil and poison. Thanks for Indians to provide a modicum of challenge and danger. Thanks for vast herds of bison to kill and skin, leaving the carcasses to rot. Thanks for bounties on wolves and coyotes. Thanks for the American dream to vulgarize and falsify until the bare lies shine through. Thanks for the KKK, for nigger-killing lawmen feeding their Nazis. For decent church-going women with their mean, pinched, bitter, evil faces. Thanks for Kill a Queer for Christ stickers. Thanks for laboratory aids. Thanks for prohibition and the war against drugs. Thanks for a country where nobody is allowed to mind his own business. Thanks for a nation of thinks. Yes, thanks for all the memories. All right, let's see your arms. You always were a headache, and you always were a bore. Thanks for the last and greatest betrayal of the last and greatest of human dreams.
I am Lucifer, the light bearer. My magnificent gift to humanity is the absolute absence of morality. Nothing restricts me. I transgress every law, I burn the sacred books and constitutions. No religion can contain me. I destroy all theories and cause all dogmas to explode. In the depths of the depths of the depths, no one lives any deeper than I do. I am the source of all abysses. I am the one whose life without grottos, the one who knows the center around which turn all densities. I am the viscosity of everything that vainly attempts to be definite, the supreme strength of magma, the stench that denounces the hypocrisy of perfumes, the carrion mother of every flower, the corrupter of vain mind, swallowing perfection. No peace with thee, no peaceful little home, no candle gospels, no sugar virgin for the clammy tongues of hairy nuns. I don't really defecate on the leprous words of morality. I do not forbid myself from imagining the prophet on all fours being mounted by a horny donkey. I am the ecstatic songster of incest and the champion of all the gravity. The nail of my finger delightedly slice open the belly of an innocent, so I can dip my breath in his strife.
Welcome to TAROT-RISM. Hello, everyone out there. We have episode number 5, and we are continuing with the Path of Illumination. Last episode, we were talking about the Malcolm X card, which is the number 10. And just a quick recap. This card, which is going to be shown. There we go. Wow. This is the Malcolm X card. This is a card where we saw Malcolm X in 3 different parts of his life. On the top, we've got when he was a pimp and hustler. On this side here, we got him as joining the Nation of Islam, and then the final Malcolm here, when he was kind of a saint, preaching brotherly love and sisterly love. And the importance of this card, very quickly, is that you see when he was assassinated, there was a stagnancy. The movement got stuck. And in this card, what we're seeing is that you have to be the person who turns the wheel. So it's up to each and every one of us to continue the movement. And the other duality of this card is that maybe it's you who need someone else to help you get unstuck. So the next card after this in the Path of Illumination is after the stagnancy period, then you get this great strength that is developed. And we noticed this in this card, the Tina Turner. Tina Turner, as you all well know, went through a whole life of struggle and pain, and she conquered throughout this test. And in this card, you see a great a wave of strength. So that after Malcolm was assassinated, there was this anger, this deep anger and a lot of emotion going around America. So this card is supposed to represent that huge wave of strength, that came from that. And after the strength, then comes the Hanged Man. And now in this card, you see Tupac here hanging upside down. This card is to show that after the assassination and then came this strength, then everyone had to realize that they're watching the world from upside down. And what this card symbolizes is a great period of reflection, of meditation, some sort of divine meditation, where you have to look at the world from upside down, and you have to realize that the important thing is to hang without concerns about winning or losing, but just to be, right? So then, so this represents this kind of deep meditation. And then comes the card where we're at right now, I think, spiritually, is now people mistakenly call this card the card of death, but it's actually the card of the unknown. And what we see here is the end of an old pattern, an old system, and the birth of a new system. So I feel like all over the world right now, we're kind of at this point where we've seen, the tragedies, and we were stuck, and we had to find how to keep the movement going. Then we found that strength, we found that deep reflection, throughout this pandemic. We're forced to stay home and think about what's going on. We're seeing the world upside down, and now comes the HR from Bad Brains in this card, and now comes the throwing away the old and making way for the new way. So these are the 4 cards that we're kind of focusing on this episode, and we begin this episode with William S. Burroughs to give you the beatnik vision. For me personally, as when I was a kid and I saw my father fall down a hole of drug addiction, I actually found solace in the words of William S. Burroughs. Even as a young kid, when I was reading Naked Lunch, the introduction of Naked Lunch, there's a article that he writes about drug dependency. So for me, with discovering the beats, I discovered Burroughs first, and then came the jazz music of Charlie Parker and Ornette Coleman. And if you think about the beatniks, at the time in America in the 40s and 50s, they were basically people who didn't believe in the common American dream. They had their own vision of the dream, and in a lot of ways, they rejected the nuclear family, or having a job and having they wanted to live crazy, and there's one passage that I like to always reflect on sometimes by Jack Kerouac, who was also had some kind of French Canadian roots, I think, and he wrote, "The only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time. The ones who never yawn or say commonplace things, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles, exploding like spiders across the stars. And in the middle, you see the blue center light pop, and everybody goes, oh." And with that wonderful quote, I'd like to get my guests on here. John B. Smith, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up, Harris?
How you doing, John B.?
Oh, I'm doing excellent, man. I'm doing excellent. I'm looking forward to the show today. We got some very interesting conversation coming up. So
we do, and we got Jenny over here in LA. Come on in, Jenny.
Hi.
Hey.
Good to see everyone.
All right.
Hey,
so the last episode we focused on the Malcolm X card, and now we're kind of this episode we're really focusing on first the beatniks. So John B, how did the beatniks affect you?
The thing about the beatniks, we have to go back and look at what was happening with the Communist Party coming out of the 1920s, because they come into the 1940s as really the group that's working with young artists in New York and Harlem. And the beatniks were mostly artists. The thing that happened during that period that was most profound was the dropping of the atomic bomb by America. Because before then, war was like being invaded. You had to, and if you didn't get caught up in that, you were pretty safe. But once they dropped the atomic bomb, life itself, the whole concept kind of changed in that you didn't know whether the world was really going to exist based on somebody pushing the button. So the beatniks, they were ready to just live. They weren't looking forward to tomorrow. They didn't even know whether we would be here tomorrow. So I think that kind of that spirit was released in young people. So we move into the early 50s where they're not popular, but the general culture starts to become aware of them, because before then they were like, this secretive kind of group,
I feel like the beatniks also were moving into like poor neighborhoods and interacting with Black culture. And what I find really beautiful about that time, I kind of like to describe it as a volcano. You know, that the mixing of the beatniks and jazz.
And
you know,
pop culture, right?
Yeah, and bebop culture. Like the music, for example, you know, they were kind of breaking grounds in this new improvisational form of music. You know, and that the beatniks, when they found that music, they found a voice. You know, and they began to dismantle like the English language, and you know, started using all sorts of different methods for poetry and prose. And I feel like, yeah, there was so much pressure on Americans or people in the world at that time about, you know, being normal, you know, joining the military, you know, leading a very normal life, and they were completely against the idea of leading a normal life, and they were searching for something more.
Yeah, well, that's to me, that movement was the first time that large, numbers of Black and white kids started coming together and looking for an alternative to that white Christian idea of what a good family was and all of those kind of things. And this is when you start finding people looking for alternative. They were living alternative lifestyles, but it was really secret. It was hidden. And I mean, in America, if you were what they call queer, back then, I mean, it was really rough. You get jumped, everybody looked down on you. That kind of stuff was really, popular in the larger culture to attack people who were different. And
I feel like the idea of sin, like it seems like beatnik culture also, they were searching for the truth and light in what would be typically called sin, but in reflection now, you see that they were actually liberating themselves, and like you said, there was an embrace of like different types of sexualities, and it was all kind of a big almost like an orgy, but in the same way that speakeasies were kind of in that same way too, right? I mean, where like the music, it wasn't like Sunday church. It was like, fun and crazy and a lot of sex and music and, sandwiches.
This is also when the Harlem, artists from Harlem will come down to the village. This is to me when sort of the melting pot idea that grew up in the late 1940s, well, by the 1950s, these were the groups that joined the civil rights movement, and it was because of I think that coming together, realizing that Black and whites were not that different in real life, and that we could come together, enjoy, and this is the hippie culture comes out of that, and these are even younger kids that wanted different. And like I say, that whole war thing with the dropping of the atomic bomb, and and this is the beginning of the Vietnam era, and so you get the anti-war movement. All of these groups come together, and that's what produces the anti-war movement in America, which is a very important movement because, like I said, this is when civil rights is just starting to become a big deal with Black people, and a lot of the white kids that were beatniks and a part of the hippie culture, they joined the civil rights movement. So by the time you get to the 1960s and the anti-war movement began, you have a real radical fringe in America because you got these different groups. Now they call them LGBTQ all of these people are coming together in the war movement, and they're breaking down these barriers where before they were separate groups, but the war movement pulled all of them together.
And in the same way, it annihilated so many people of like the young people that were sent to war.
Yeah, well, you know, this was what I think San Francisco was really a hotbed of the hippie movement. And what they did, the reason that they were so powerful, because they did like Black Power groups. Later on, they started what they call human beings. And these human beings were where they came together and just really talked about things like, you know, new lifestyles. They were, you know, debating philosophy, changes, how to change America. And these kind of get-togethers were called human beings. And this is really the beginning of the anti-war movement.
It's kind of almost like the continuation of the Black Power weekend or sleepover.
Yeah, it definitely was. And like I say, this is the coming together of these two groups. They had different ways of going about it, but the war itself is really what radicalized young people in America, because they didn't want to go fight in Vietnam, some people that they didn't even know about. And it was the government was the thing that was pushing the war. And so by the time we get to 1964, when Kennedy is assassinated and Johnson takes over, and he's the one that accelerates the war. And this is when the anti-war movement really becomes a big deal in America. And it comes together with the civil rights movement in a lot of ways. I think that's a very important juncture.
This is a good point, I think, and watch the first clip of Dr. King addressing the UN.
Yep.
So let's take a look.
Cities, campuses, and farms, we have come in tens of thousands to march and rally at the United Nations in New York and at the birthplace of the World Organization in San Francisco on this, the 15th day of April 1967. We, the participants in today's unprecedented national peace demonstration, although of many national origins, faiths, and shades of political opinion, are united in our conviction of the imperative need for an immediate, peaceful solution to an illegal and unjustifiable war. We are determined that the killing be stopped and that a nuclear holocaust be avoided. We rally at the United Nations in order to reaffirm our support of the principles of peace, universality, equal rights, and self-determination of peoples embodied in the Charter and acclaimed by mankind, but violated by the United States.
Did you have any exchange with Mr. Bunch over your differences of opinion as to the question?
Well, you know, Dr. King, at this time, he really changes the dynamics in America in regards to the war. Because prior to then, I said, coming out of the March on Washington, you had what they call the Big Six, where they were really the civil rights movement. And this is when Dr. King starts to see the problem more than just lunch counter, freedom ride kind of activities, and he starts to look at the larger picture of poverty in America and the need for not just Black people to come together, but Native Americans, people in Appalachia, all of these poor people, it starts to become a part of his concern, which is something that other civil rights leaders were not really into. The fact that when he came out against the war, that really, pissed Johnson off. And not only Johnson, but J. Edgar Hoover, who's the bad guy that comes all the way from the 1920s up through the 1930s, fighting the effort of Black people to liberate themselves. And so when we get to the 1960s and Dr. King comes out against the war, Hoover is really, really powerful. He's one of the most powerful men in America because he's got a dossier on everybody. That's why nobody went against him.
Including
you. That's when he comes out and says that Dr. Martin Luther King is the most dangerous man in America. And once he makes that statement, Dr. King wants to, have a meeting of the minds, so to speak, to find out, why he would say that about him when he was about peace, and after that, then if you look at that United Nations film just then, you notice that there's not a lot of civil rights leaders around him like there were at the March on Washington. See, and this is because coming out against the war was something that really the large majority of the country was really for the war. And it was the activists, like I say, the anti-war movement that was starting to grow, and Dr. King became a part of that. That was when he made his speech there.
Right, and I remember that when me and you were in Berlin showing the Invaders and giving some talks, we actually learned about how Dr. King was invited to Berlin in 1963 by Willy Brandt, the mayor of Berlin, and how Dr. King had arranged for a sermon in East Berlin, and he surprised the people in West Berlin by saying that he was going to go across. And of course, the people from West Berlin, including the mayor, they confiscated his passport because they didn't want him to go and talk to the enemy, so to speak. And he didn't care. He went without a passport to the border and showed his American Express card, which the East German police had absolutely no idea what that piece of plastic even was. But they let him go, and then he did a sermon. He did two sermons actually over in East Berlin. And was talking to them about how he felt their oppression was so similar to the oppression of Black people and also poor people in America. So I'm always amazed at how radical Dr. King really was, and people seem to forget that about him very easily.
Yeah, well, he was much smarter than he looked. I'll say that. Because not only that the thing he did at the border with the American Express card, he saw things that other people were not really concerned about. And this is, again, I think, why he saw the poor differently and wanted to, work with them. But that caused real problem. When we get to 1966, when he does the Meredith March and he meets Stokely, and Stokely makes the statement about Black Power, that created a real split in the civil rights movement because most of them wanted to, they wanted Dr. King to talk to the people in corporate boardrooms and raise money. And push the integration idea, going to white schools and moving into white neighborhoods and things like that. For most of the civil rights, that's what the civil rights leaders were really into and what they were really pushing. But Dr. King was looking at the big picture, and he was seeing people that needed more than, the access to buy a house in a white neighborhood. They couldn't buy a house in the black community, especially when you go to big, cities like Chicago, where people were living in these tenements, no heat and things like that. So his move toward the poor really separated him from most of the civil rights leaders.
And he was fighting for the poor and like all like nationalities or all of the races, like poor white people and Latinos and other people other than just.
This might be a good time to see our next clip. It's Dr. King at the New York City Riverside Church. Let's check this out.
There is at the outset a very obvious and almost facile connection between the war in Vietnam and the struggle I and others have been waging in America. A few years ago, there was a shining moment in that struggle. It seemed as if there was a real promise of hope for the poor, both black and white, through the poverty program. Then came the build-up in Vietnam, and I watched the program broken as if it was some idle political plaything of a society gone mad on war. And I knew that America would never invest the necessary funds or energies in rehabilitation of its poor so long as adventures like Vietnam continue to draw men and skills and money like some demonic destructive suction tube. And you may not know it, my friends, but it is estimated that we spend $500,000 to kill each enemy soldier, while we spend only $53 for each person classified as poor. And much of that $53 goes for salaries to people who are not poor. So I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and attack it as such. Perhaps the more tragic recognition of reality took place when it became clear to me that the war was doing far more than devastating the hopes of the poor at home. It was sending their sons and their brothers and their husbands to fight and die in extraordinarily high proportions relative to the rest of the population. We were taking the black young men who had been crippled by society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Harlem. So we have been repeatedly faced with the cruel irony of watching Negro and white boys on TV screens as they kill and die together for a nation that has been unable to seat them together in the same schoolroom. So we watch them in brutal solidarity, burning the huts of a poor village. But we realize that they would hardly live on the same block in Chicago or Atlanta. As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men, I have told them that Molotov cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. But they ask, and rightly so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems. And I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government, America and most of its newspapers applauded me in Montgomery. And I stood before thousands of Negroes getting ready to riot when my home was bombed and said, we can't do it this way. They applauded us in the sit-in movement. We nonviolently decided to sit in at lunch counters. They applauded us on the freedom rides when we accepted blows without retaliation. Oh, the press was so noble in its applause and so noble in its praise when I was saying, be nonviolent toward Bull Connor. There's something strangely inconsistent about a nation and a press that will praise you when you say be nonviolent toward Jim Clark, but will curse and damn you when you say be nonviolent toward little brown Vietnamese children. There's something wrong with that press. Another burden of responsibility was placed upon me in 1964. And I cannot forget that the Nobel Peace Prize was not just something taking place, but it was a commission to work harder than I had ever worked before for the brotherhood of man. This is a calling that takes me beyond national allegiances, but even if it were not present, I would yet have to live with the meaning of my commitment to the ministry of Jesus Christ. To me, the relationship of this ministry to the making of peace is so obvious that I sometimes marvel at those who ask me why I am speaking against the war. Could it be that they do not know that the good news was meant for all men, for communists and capitalists, for their children and ours, for black and white, for revolutionary and conservative? Have they forgotten that my ministry is in obedience to the one who loved his enemies so fully that he died for them? What then can I say to the Viet Cong or to Castro or to Mao as a faithful minister to Jesus Christ? Can I threaten them with death? Or must I not share with them my life? There will be no meaningful solution until some attempt is made to know these people and hear their broken cries. And who are we supporting in Vietnam today? It's a man by the name of General Key, who fought with the French against his own people, and who said on one occasion that the greatest hero of his life is Hitler. This is who we are supporting in Vietnam today. Oh, our government and the press generally won't tell us these things, but God told me to tell you this morning. The truth must be told.
All right. I find it really amazing how he talks about the hypocrisy of how the American government has always supported fascist leaders in different countries to find an easy way to overthrow or control other governments. And it's just something that seems to be repeated over and over again. Sorry.
I was just saying, in the hypocrisy of asking the movement in America to be nonviolent, but then sending the children off to war to be violent against Vietnam.
Yes, I didn't really know Dr. King during this time, because see, this is late '67 when we were just organizing the Invaders. So I'm just really starting to get into Black Power, and Dr. King was making a transition that a lot of people are not really aware of because of the problems he was encountering within the civil rights movement. Not only were civil rights leaders opposed to Black Power and doing everything they could to keep young black activists from really being recognized in the black community as leaders. They were the civil rights movement itself. Most people don't know. It came out of the 1920s. And people like W.E.B. Du Bois, they started it. And W.E.B. Du Bois had this philosophy called the talented 10th. The talented 10th was, he believed that only 10% of people in the black community were capable of leadership. So that philosophy is a part of why they fought the Black Power movement so hard, is because they saw themselves as the talented 10th. Sort of like they inherited leadership. So we were having to fight with them just to be able to get into meetings and to be a part of what we saw as the developing future of black leadership in the black community, but they didn't see us as a part of leadership. It was fine for them to use us as marchers and things like that, but when they had meetings to where they were developing strategy and stuff like that, then we were not a part of that. And Dr. King, because of his stand against the war, they had literally turned their backs on him because they were allied with President Johnson and his war on poverty. But the war on poverty, as Dr. King said, was really a charade. It was a political a campaign slogan, so to speak. And they instituted the war on poverty, but it was about giving mostly white kids jobs. The few black people actually worked in the war on poverty, doing things. In Memphis, the Map South organization that we started out working with, they were a part of the war on poverty. But because we were talking Black Power, Kirkendall, who was the congressman then, he came out against us, went to I was working for the depot at the time, got me fired from the depot, got Charles, Kobe, and myself fired from the war on poverty because of their effort to make Black Power a threat to the community. And so Dr. King, on the other hand, was not facing that kind of fight, but the civil rights leaders were not standing with him.
And that was the point also. I mean, you were on the watch list of COINTELPRO, and yes. You told us on the last episode about K. Pittman Black, the journalist who broke the story about your affiliation with Black Power and working those jobs. So should we go to the next Dr. King quote here?
Yeah.
This is a new beginning on the economic front. We've dealt with the social question of legal segregation to a great degree, and we've dealt with the political problem of right to vote to a great extent. Now we are making a beginning on the economic. We assemble here together today with common problems, bringing together ethnic groups that maybe have not been together in this type of meeting in the past. I know I haven't been in a meeting like this, and it's been one of my dreams that we would come together and realize our common problems. And I do want to express my deep personal gratitude and the appreciation of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to each of you. And power for poor people will really mean having the ability, the togetherness, the assertiveness, and the aggressiveness to make the power structure of this nation say yes when they may be desirous of saying no. And it is my hope that we will get together and be together and really stand up to gain power for poor people, black people, Mexican Americans, American Indians, Puerto Ricans, Appalachian whites, all working together to solve the problem of poverty. We're getting ready to deal with the economic issue. We're getting ready to demand jobs and income. We're tired of working full-time jobs for part-time income. All right. We're tired of living in run-down, dilapidated, rat-infested shacks and slums. We are tired of our children having to attend overcrowded, inferior schools. Make it plain. And we are tired of our men not being able to be men because they can't find work.
Amazing. So yeah, well, now we see this transition where he's really addressing like the heart of the situation.
Yeah, well, he's in a real dangerous place in his development, because he's speaking about the poor and what he feels need to be done by the government. And this is when Hoover really starts to zero in on Dr. King, because he's charging the government with responsibility for poverty, and which is the problem he was having with the civil rights leaders. Civil rights, as I was saying, when it was developed, it was about the middle class. And that talented 10th idea was about people who were middle class minded, and they were interested in integrating schools and, as Dr. King said, moving into white neighborhoods and getting those kind of handouts from white people to keep the rest of the black community calmed down and accepting of the conditions that he just outlined. And that coupled with Hoover, because J. Edgar Hoover, this is when COINTELPRO was really rolling that out and aiming that at the Black Power movement. And so Dr. King, he's in between the two. He wants to get the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement together. And the Black Power movement, guys like Stokely and Ralph, they knew Dr. King. He knew them down in Atlanta. And so he saw no problem with them, with working with them. But it was the other civil rights leaders. And when you look at that clip that you just showed, you don't see any of them. All the people there are different people. But when you look back again at the March on Washington, he was surrounded by civil rights leaders, because at that point, they saw him as one of them. But once he started talking about the poor, that's when the problem started.
I find it really interesting also. I mean, J. Edgar Hoover, Newton started in 1910. You know, and so he's like this evil kind of Wizard of Oz behind the scenes. And I find, you know, like the same you can find with Dick Cheney. You know, there's these people that are hidden in the government that are actually pulling all the strings and you know, have no conception of the value of human life. They, you know,
Right.
Yeah, I find it frightening how that's always the case, it seems.
Yeah, well, Hoover is a guy that really did more than any other single individual to support segregation, because segregation, when he came into the government, that's why he came into the government. Woodrow Wilson brought him into the government and put him in charge of what he called the radical division. And that division was to destroy any group that was trying to change that, segregation mindset, or the way that Black people were relegated to the bottom. Well, that was Hoover's job, to make sure that continued. So this is why he and Dr. King was on different sides, and he put COINTELPRO. They started surveilling Dr. King after the March on Washington, but it was just mostly they were tapping his phone and things like that. But once he got came out against the war and started talking about the poor, they really started recruiting people around him to try and isolate Dr. King.
Has it ever been discovered Hoover's motivation of why he wanted to bring down all of these radicals, or was it all through racist tendencies, or was it more to protect a democracy?
It didn't come out that he was a sexual deviant kind of, or and he kind of hid that from the rest of the world. And I find that there's always these dictators, they have this tendency of hiding these secret emotions that, if they had just kind of chilled out and let their beauty fly free, maybe they'd be happier.
The thing about Hoover that you really have to, as I say, go back to when he was brought into government. He was brought into government for the purpose of attacking any radical group. He started with the Communist Party because the Communist Party was working in Harlem with Black people. They were the ones working with the artists. So when you get to the 1950s, they have McCarthyism, which is when they were trying to destroy the Communist Party. That was who was behind that. Mm-hmm. So he's really just continued that pattern all the way into the 1960s of trying to destroy radical groups. And like I said, they had 4 different groups surveilling Dr. King that Hoover created. And the one thing they were trying to do was buy up people around him. And so they could watch him and surveil him and keep him informed of what Dr. King's plans were.
I was actually reading about how the Communist Party, you mentioned the Scottsboro Boys last time we were talking about the court case in Alabama, and I read that it was the Communist Party that actually got Al Capone's lawyer, the lawyer who got Al Capone free or whatever, and he was sent to Alabama to represent the Black people. I think it was 10 men that were accused actually of raping, or falsely accused of raping a white woman. But it's interesting that Al Capone's lawyer was sent to go fight for them, and it was fandangled by the Communist Party.
Well, that was one of the big things about the Communist Party, because when the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy v. Ferguson, which established legal segregation, the thing that they really did was lock the courthouse door for Black people. You could not go into court as a plaintiff. You were always brought to court as a defendant. And so lawyers and things like that were not really readily available to Black people. And that was one of the things the Communist Party did that really helped Black people, was they set up different legal groups that would defend Black people who were in court on rape charges and things like that, because they had the lawyers.
Right.
I think that Scottsboro Boys case might have been the first time that they actually let Black people on the jury.
Yeah, that Scarborough Boys case was really a pivotal case because before then you didn't really have, as far as black people, access to good lawyers. They said, like you said, Al Capone, they sent top lawyers into court to defend black people.
It's kind of what the ACLU does for us today.
Yeah.
Actually, speaking of things today, the EJI is one thing that you told me about, John B., that really blew my mind. You want to talk a bit about that?
Well, the Equal Justice, they're in Montgomery, Alabama, which was where Dr. King started out. And they have worked on trying to establish the lynchings that took place all over the South. They have documented almost 5,000 separate lynchings. I've gone down to, they have these what they call lynch search gatherings on Saturday morning. And what you do is you go and you sit through an orientation, and they give you a list of people or sites where people will believe to be lynched. And you have to go to that site, and document that site and get a jar full of the earth from that site. And they have what they call a wall of remembrance, where it's just full of jars of earth that people have collected from the different sites where black people have been lynched. And they've also established a monument for lynch victims in Montgomery, which is a first. And I think every black person needs to visit that.
They actually made obelisks, giant obelisks with the dirt of each person and their story written on the obelisk. And in fact, I think that they modeled it a little bit off the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin.
Yes.
And what amazing thing is, I mean, you can go right next to the Reichstag, which is, like our kind of like Washington Monument or whatever. And right next to it is this gigantic, Holocaust Memorial. And I feel like Germany had done a really good job in trying to in reparations,
Yeah, I know. You took me to the Holocaust monument, and I was really appreciative to be able to see it myself, because I thought it was a building, but it's just an area of stones, and it's like a maze that you can go through and see the names and of people. It's really powerful.
All right, so let's go next to the clip. Are we moving to the drum major speech?
Oh no!
Yeah, the drum major. Right, Martin Luther.
Yeah.
Yep. Poison ego.
This is a very interesting part now that we're going to go into. And I had never thought about the idea of a drum major and the or the infection that is caused by being a drum major. I wonder if a lot of people quit playing drums after this speech. But so just before we go into it, I just wanted to say how we see this tendency in a lot of people and activists, that sometimes the reason behind their activism is more selfish and more in to be heard over everyone else, or to kind of be given the conch, like in Lord of the Flies. So maybe let's listen to the first part.
Sure.
Let us look calmly and honestly at ourselves, and we will discover that we too have those same basic desires for recognition, for importance, that same desire for attention, that same desire to be first. Of course, the other disciples got mad with James and John, and you can understand why, but we must understand that we have some of the same James and John qualities. And that is deep down within all of us an instinct. It's a kind of drum major instinct, a desire to be out front, a desire to lead the parade, a desire to be first. And it is something that runs the whole gamut of life. And so before we condemn them, let us see that we all have the drum major instinct. We all want to be important, to surpass others, to achieve distinction, to lead the parade. Alfred Adler.
Well, that speech is, Dr. King gives that speech at the Ebenezer Baptist Church here in Atlanta. And he gives that speech 2 months after he announces the Poor People's Campaign. And when he announces the Poor People's Campaign, he wants to get the poor and take them to Washington, D.C. And they're going to just stay there until the country recognizes the needs of the poor. And so once he makes the announcement for the Poor People's Campaign, which is in December, on December 4th, 1967, he goes on the road speaking in churches to people who have supported him in his previous marches. And he's expecting them to do the same for the Poor People's Campaign that they did for his other marches. But after a month of stomping in these, around the country to get support for the Poor People's Campaign, he realized that they were not coming through. They weren't volunteering to, raise money to help him. They were not making their churches and facilities available to him. They were not getting volunteers to help him, because he was talking about taking 1 million people to Washington, D.C. Now, this is a big, big job. And he's thinking at this time, when he announces the Poor People's Campaign, that they were going to come in and support him in the same way that they had in the past. So when they don't do that, he makes this speech, and the idea of James and John is that they asked Jesus, could one sit on his right hand side and the other on the left hand side when he enters into his kingdom. So this is his way of pointing out to all the civil rights leaders that you can't ask, because Jesus Christ, he responds to them and say that, can you be baptized with the same baptism that I was baptized with? In other words, are you willing to go through and do what I did? And and this is his way of making that point through his drum major. As you see, he says, that we all want to be out front. We all want to be recognized. So he's really making this speech to talk to the civil rights leaders.
It's interesting too. When I started working on the Black Power Tarot with Jodorowsky, one of the first things that he told me was that I had to work without my ego, and so when I was selecting the people that I wanted on the cards and everything like that, it wasn't based on like fan love or something like that, or like devotion to a certain music, but it was based on who really rightly fits the card properly, and that's one of the reasons it took like almost 2 years to find all of those right people for that. So so the ego has been haunting us forever, it seems. So let's go into the next clip.
So this goes into advertising.
Right.
The presence of this instinct explains why we are so often taken by advertisers. Those gentlemen of massive verbal persuasion And they have a way of saying things to you that kind of gets you in the bind. In order to be a man of distinction, you must drink this whiskey. In order to make your neighbors envious, you must drive this type of car. In order to be lovely to love, you must wear this kind of lipstick or this kind of perfume. And you know, before you know it, you're just buying that stuff. That's the way the advertisers do it. I got a letter the other day, and it was a magazine coming out, and opened up. Dear Dr. King, as you know, you are on many mailing lists, and you are categorized as highly intelligent, progressive, a lover of the arts and the sciences, and I know you will want to read what I have to say. Of course I did. After you said all of that and explained me so exactly, of course I wanted to read it. But very seriously, it goes through life. The drum major instinct is real.
Wow. He sounds a bit like Little Richard there for a second.
Yeah. Well, you know, see, this is the thing that he's pointing out about how easy it is to want to be that guy. You know, you want to look the right way. And this also goes to the heart of the matter of the civil rights leaders wanting to move into the white neighborhoods, wanting to, you know, get the good jobs and do the things that help them, you know. And he's trying to get them to think about the poor, people who need food, you know, need a place to stay, not a better house, just any kind of house, you know, just any place to stay. So his appeal in this speech to me is very brilliant in terms of how he reveals and layers the selfish and the envious nature of people.
I find when to take it into a modern context also, I mean, now that people have this second life they have online, you know, and they're there's more of this influence from these places, you know, on a cellular level almost, because people are so addicted to their telephones and their computers and stuff. I wonder, do you ever think that the world or the modern world is too far gone to adapt to a way that would be good for everyone?
No, I'm an eternal optimist when it comes to people. I believe that we have the capacity to do things and to be individuals that we never thought we could be. And I think that's the point in his drum major, pointing out that drum major idea that people have a great capacity, and love is such a powerful force if you allow it to come through. Most of us, as he's pointing out, we're so selfish in our nature, and we're so much about ourselves that love can't grow under those conditions. Love is a giving emotion. You know, you got to be reaching out. You got to be trying to touch. You got to really want to do the right thing. You know, but if you're an individual who's so concerned about what's in it for me, and that's what I think he's trying to get at.
It's amazing because the way I understand the path of illumination of the tarot is also like this, because, you know, the first card is the Fool, is the zero, and in order to follow the path of illumination, you know, the tarot is saying that you have to be able to laugh at the truths, to laugh at yourself, to sit at the table. Sorry, hold on.
Someone's trying to someone in Berlin.
Hey, nothing like live.
Sorry.
Nothing like live.
As I was saying, so the path of illumination is like you have to be a fool in the beginning, and then The next step is magician, where you learn the tools to control your destiny. And then right when you learn the tools, the next card is of compassion, you know, and of the high priestess, you know, and like understanding people's pain and making it your own, and finding, you know, a way to help people out of their own misery.
Yeah.
Yep. We're all born to love.
All
So
right.
can we move on to the next video?
Yes.
It continues this same topic.
We see with our own eyes. In fact, not too long ago, a man down in Mississippi said that God was a charter member of the White Citizens Council. And so, God being the charter member means that everybody who's in that has a kind of divinity, a kind of superiority. And think of what has happened in history as a result of this perverted use of the drum major instinct. It's led to the most tragic prejudice, the most tragic expressions of man's inhumanity to man. The other day I was saying, I always try to do a little converting when I'm in jail. And when we were in jail in Birmingham the other day, the white wardens and all enjoyed coming around the cell to talk about the race problem. And they were showing us where we were so wrong demonstrating. And they were showing us where segregation was so right. And they were showing us where intermarriage was so wrong. So I would get to preaching, and we would get to talking calmly because they wanted to talk about it. And then we got down one day to the point, that was the second or third day, to talk about where they lived and how much they were earning. And when those brothers told me what they were earning, I said, now, you know what? You ought to be marching with us. You just as poor as Negro. And I said, you are put in the position of supporting your oppressor, because through prejudice and blindness, you fail to see that the same forces that oppress Negroes in American society oppress poor white people. And all you are living on is the satisfaction of your skin being white and the drum major instinct of thinking that you are somebody big because you're white. And you're so poor you can't send your children to school. You ought to be out here marching with every one of us every time we have a march. Now that's a fact. The poor white has been put into this position where through blindness and prejudice he is forced to support his oppressors. And the only thing he has going for him is the false feeling that he's superior because his skin is white and can hardly eat and make his ends meet week in and week out. Now, not only does it stop, not only does this thing go into the racial struggle, it goes into the struggle between nations. And I would submit to you this morning that what is wrong in the world today is that the nations of the world are engaged in a bitter, colossal contest for supremacy. And if something doesn't happen to stop this trend, I'm sorely afraid that we won't be here to talk about Jesus Christ and about God and about brotherhood too many more years. If somebody doesn't bring an end to this suicidal thrust that we see in the world today, none of us are going to be around, because somebody's going to make the mistake through our senseless blunderings of dropping a nuclear bomb somewhere, and then another one is going to drop, and don't let anybody fool you. This can happen within a matter of seconds. They have 20 megaton bombs in Russia right now that can destroy a city as big as New York in 3 seconds with everybody wiped away in every building. And we can do the same thing to Russia and China. But this is where we are drifting, and we are drifting there because nations are caught up with the drum major instinct. I must be first. I must be supreme. Our nation must rule the world. And I am sad to say that the nation in which we live is the supreme culprit. And I'm going to continue to say it to America, because I love this country too much to see the drift that it has taken.
Incredible how it still rings true, and how he analyzes the world, and it hasn't changed.
I mean, he could be speaking today about this rise of white nationalism in America today, and it's coming from the White House. The president is doing the same thing as he's talking about those sheriffs.
Yeah.
The people that's following him, they're just like those that they don't live any better than black people.
Right.
They are, but they are fed that soup about you're better than them. You're superior to them. And to me, I will always, as I said, look at people for who they are and what they're willing to do. I think if you don't have people like that constantly stirring up that idea that these people are better than these people or something like that, we do pretty good. As he was talking about in a marriage, everybody needs somebody, color comes with the body when you are born, but your heart is just like everybody else's. And it's what you learn. It's your environment from when you were a child up until, that you're fed, you eat that. And what you eat becomes a part of you and becomes a part of your body and the way you think and the way you act. And the good thing is that we can change. A lot of us start out in those kind of environments, but we encounter something along the way somewhere, and people or someone will say something or show you something or do something for you when you thought they would be the last person to help you. And just that one instant can start you to think that maybe I'm not right.
I find it amazing too what he's talking about militarism, and how you look at the amount of money that is spent by governments for new bombs and new things and wars that don't need to be, and I mean in the trillions they spend, and then they complain about not wanting to spend it on people at home, people who are suffering. It would be so a fraction of that money could feed everyone, house everyone, but yet that same rhetoric, they're always playing that same song about funding the military.
Well, like right here, the U.S. Defense Department, $3 trillion. They got more bombs, tanks, guns, planes than they'll ever use. But they get another $3 trillion next year, and they have to find stuff to do with it. That's why you have wars. And then they sell it and give it to other countries to keep it going. It's the arms industry.
Yeah.
Was that Halliburton, right? When my generation growing up.
Oh, yes. Dick Cheney's people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Should move on.
Those evils, the evils of the world unite.
It's like your Burl's prayer at the beginning. Thanks for the Ku Klux Klan. Thanks for all that. It was sarcastic, of course, but he was right.
Laboratory AIDS is my favorite. It's amazing too, because I find that when we started the show, we were talking about the beats being a part of the civil rights movement. I for example, when I was a teenager, when I discovered the beats, it really showed me another world, and I would say it even it made walk a different path. You know, I didn't feel that I had to, you know, be a part of the football team or this kind of things growing up, you know, and I'd rather just smoke weed and play music with, like, you know, degenerate people and have degenerate fun. But
you find your own tribe, right? So when this,
exactly,
a lot of the subcultures kind of, you don't see like a lot of what's going on the outside of you, or like race or gender inequality or sexual inequality, because you have this like subculture tribe and like a universal consciousness between you all, which happens with the bebop and the beatniks as well.
Yeah, that's like when and that's kind of like the three of us also meeting in this kind of plane, you know. I feel like we are from the same pod in a sense. And,
well, you know, social media is really something that's homogenizing the world. It not only giving voice, but it's allowing people to see other people doing same thing they do, but they just doing it in a different place, in a different way. Mm-hmm. And the walls are coming down, even though Trump is trying to build a wall. They're coming down. People are growing, and they're realizing that it's not that way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like the people, it's more and more, it's becoming more and more obvious that the powers that be have very wrong intentions for the fate of our human race.
That's what the drum major instinct, you know, that part that Dr. King is discussing now about how that makes the world what it is today. You know, make people react as they do.
It's funny too, because when I remember when I started when I moved to Germany and started collecting people for the shrines, one of the major ideas that I had was to find not professional players, but to find brothers, you know, or sisters, to, like, you know, who didn't care about, you know, stardom or anything like that, but they were about creating a sound, you know. So mm-hmm. I just love the idea that he talks about this as a drum major thing, because, like, you couldn't have a band with everyone playing lead, you know.
Right.
So there's this beautiful hive mind that you have to go, and I think more and more that the hive mind is what's gonna save us all and unite and make some change.
Yeah.
All right. So should we go to the last part of the drum major?
Is it death or first in love?
No, it's first in love. First in love. That's right.
Uh-huh.
Here we go.
You want to be first? You want to be great? You want to be important? You want to be significant? Well, you ought to be. If you're going to be my disciple, you must be. But he reordered priorities. And he said, yes, don't give up this instinct. It's a good instinct if you use it right. Yes. It's a good instinct if you don't distort it and pervert it. Don't give it up. Keep feeling the need for being important. Keep feeling the need for being first. But I want you to be first in love. I want you to be first in moral excellence. I want you to be first in generosity. That is what I want you to do. And he transformed the situation by giving a new definition of greatness. And you know how he said it? He said, now, brethren, I can't give you greatness. And really, I can't make you first. This is what Jesus said to James and John. You must earn it. True greatness comes not by favoritism, but by fitness. And the right hand and the left are not mine to give. They belong to those who are prepared. And so Jesus gave us a new norm of greatness. If you want to be important, wonderful. If you want to be recognized, wonderful. If you want to be great, wonderful. But recognize that he who is greatest among you shall be your servant. That's a new definition of greatness. And this morning, the thing that I like about it, by giving that definition of greatness, it means that everybody can be great. Because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace.
Beautiful.
Make it plain.
Make it plain.
Yes. Yes. That service, you know, the way he approaches that, most people miss that. You know, they, as he was saying about, you have to, when he was talking to James and John about, it's good you want to be all that, you know, we want you to be all that, but to be first, you got to be last, you know, in a way. You can't start out first and just stay first, which is the problem he was having with civil rights leaders. Everybody wanted to be out front, you know, everybody wanted to be the leader, but nobody wanted to help him. Nobody wanted to serve in the way that he was outlining about doing the Poor People's Campaign. You know, they all wanted to be the ones that get the credit.
Yeah, Malik Rahim calls it being drunk on prosperity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely say that. I mean, since we started working together and going and like spreading the Black Power Tarot gospel, you know, and I remember just seeing the people, you know, when you were giving talks about it, and I could just see that people were really moved, you know, and it was an incredible thing to witness, you know, whether we were in like, you know, a bunch of students in a small school in Berlin or, you know, in Colorado in front of, you know, a bunch of people in Colorado Springs or whatever. But I feel like I like the fact that Dr. K acknowledges that there is this great feeling or great thing that comes out of it too. You know, like we have to try to address it. But I love how he kind of like does a psychological analysis almost of like, you know, what the good and the bad things outweighing each other.
Well, I have to thank you for the whole idea of Black Power Tarot, because you found a way to open me up and to give me a chance to serve, as Dr. King said, because that opportunity took me to places I never thought I would go and introduced me to people who, you know, I didn't really, from a personal, knew existed or even cared about Black Power, you know, and to be able to talk to young people who were so optimistic and so hopeful about the world. You look in their faces. I know when we were in that school in Germany, when we talked to the high school kids, you know, right. I looked in their faces and they were all, you know, their eyes were so bright. They were so interested, you know, and they were like hanging on my every word. And, you know, I'm just talking, but they received it like I was really giving them something that they could use, that they could build on, and they could carry with them. And to me, that was a privilege that I would not have had you not come up with the Black Power Tarot.
I mean, thank you so much. I mean, I think the whole process that we had, the way the Invaders film was made too, you know, I knew Pritchard for a long time, the director, you know, and And I think the way that Pritchard and John B and JB were able to like find you, you know, and gain your trust, you know, because I think when they had found you, you had kind of given up on telling the Invaders story and righting the wrongs, you know, and for me, I mean, just, you know, you basically kind of adopted us as sons, you know, and I feel like you know, being a part of this whole the making of the film, and then from that the creation of the tarot, you know, it was all something very like family for me, you know, and I think in my whole life, you know, I guess having a deadbeat dad, you know, made me search for maybe like, you know, spiritual fathers in another way, and I was lucky enough to you know, I had Mighty Hannibal, you know, or Andre Williams, or Melvin Van Peebles too, you know, these people. I know Jodorowsky, of course, too. So these people, I feel like there's a tendency right now in the young people to not listen to the elders enough, you know, and I feel like this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this show with you, you know, because I mean, you've been through so much in your life, and I think it's so important, you know, all these steps are shown so that, you know, that the future generations can, you know, not make the same mistakes and you know, work for a better future.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Eric. I was going to say, Erich has allowed your voice, which is like a brilliant oral historian, to come to a new variety of young people and people who are in the art that is focused in like maybe punk or rock and roll and rebellion. So that's also a gift that he's given as you for other people.
Well, I know I'm really proud of the young generation. I think they show a lot of courage, and they are really concerned. When I look at the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, young people, the next generation is what it's all about. It's always what it's about. And I feel good because they're showing they care. They want the world to be better. They look, and this is not black kids, so these are all kind of kids, you know. There are some, and this is around the world. The Black Lives Matter protests. I mean, New Zealand. I never really thought that people in New Zealand would care about what's happening in America. And this is, to me, the hopeful nature of the world. And when you see people who, like Trump right now, he's preaching division and hatred and meanness, you know, and from the position he has to do this, he can really affect people in a way that, you know, it's dangerous to the world in terms of our existence. But it's because the young people who are saying just the opposite, and they're willing to get up today and march and get up tomorrow and march again. And you know, and he's got police out there in the street. They were same way against us. And that's why I'm so hopeful, is that they are standing, even though they are facing tear gas and bombs and all of that stuff, they come back the next day. And that's what keeps the world going.
Right now, it's quite frightening. Also, what's happening in Canada, where like there's First Nations fishermen were being attacked by commercial fishermen and stuff, and the oil pipeline stuff. Like, there's a huge hypocrisy right now. Well, I mean, it's always been there in Canada, but I feel like it's very hard to look around the world, because it seems that it's not only America that's falling to pieces. It's everywhere, you know, and it's all the same kind of poisonous thought that is, like, you know, making its way into the minds of normal people, you know, and yeah, I feel
glad that we are able to do this little bit that we are doing, to put a good word out there about people, to raise issues that are meaningful, and to highlight the problem the brothers are having in Canada with the fishermen, You know, it's the same kind of racist. We've always had this, so we can do what we want. Authorities, they feel it's just like police here in America. I mean, you kill a person for not following your instructions. That, to me, is insane. This is a life. It doesn't matter whether it's black or white, but this is a life. And the reason you kill this person is because they won't do what you say. You know,
this might be a good time to go into the final part of the drum major speech.
That day when we will be victimized with what is life's final common denominator. That's something we call death. We all think about it, and every now and then I think about my own death, and I think about my own funeral, and I don't think of it in a morbid sense. And every now and then I ask myself, what is it that I would want said? And I leave the word to you this morning. If any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, tell them not to talk too long. And every now and then I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to say that day that I tried to be right on the war question. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say that I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a drum major, say that I was a drum major for justice. Say that I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for righteousness. And all of the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. But I just want to leave a committed life behind. And that's all I want to say. If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a world song, if I can show somebody he's traveling wrong, then my living will not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian ought, if I can bring salvation to a world once wrought, if I can spread the message as the Master taught, then my living will not be in vain. Yes, Jesus, I want to be on your right or your left side. Not for any selfish reason. I want to be on your right or your left side, not in terms of some political kingdom or ambition, but I just want to be there in love and in justice and in truth and in commitment to others so that we can make of this old world a new world.
Wow. Powerful. Powerful. You know, it's one thing to me to have the status that he achieved and to come to a place to where none of that is really important to him. It's serving people and helping people, and that's what he want remembered. You know, you don't find many people, because most people got walls of plaques, and when you go to visit them, they show them off. It means so much to them to have been recognized by this group or to have their name called. And they go through all kinds of changes to get their name on this list. But this man was one of the most noted men during that time. And he's concerned about people remembering that he tried to serve people. He tried to help people. He tried to feed people. That's powerful.
Yeah. I've been noticing this tone of this show with Martin Luther King has been a lot about hope, love, joy, and
well, our next section, which is the sanitation strike, that really brings him out. This is when I am exposed to him personally, because up until this point, I've never even met him. And he's never come to Memphis to do anything there. And I think that was somewhat a part of the leadership in Memphis there, because they really didn't want to bring him when they for the sanitation strike. But circumstances changed that. And I think that's going to be an interesting session for us to have, because it'll give an opportunity to see that in action as far as his desire to be remembered and his desire to help the poor, because that's what this is all about. His plan that he's made up until this point is to take 1 million people to Washington, D.C., to stay there until the government decides to do something to help people across the country. And there's just as great a force on the other side pushing against him. And that's Hoover and what they are doing, and the people that he's counting on who are not helping him. And I think that's going to be a very interesting session.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. Well, thank you, John B, for joining us, and we look forward for the next chapter, and especially hearing about your interactions with, like, your personal interactions with Dr. King. I think we got a wrap. So I hope all you viewers out there join us next week, same time, same place. And thank you, Jenny, and Pete, and Pietro, and that's all. So good night, and we hope you listen to the words of Dr. King as closely as we did today, and keep them in your heart, and make the right decisions. All right. Good night.
Economic power for poor people was one of the main reasons that Dr. King got assassinated. He was talking about poor people power.
I've been waiting, anticipating for the lights of things to change. Look out my window, I see the moon glow. Looks like another night is ending.
Dr. King met with militants in Memphis and afterwards felt that they had found some way that they could all work together.
To me, represents much more than just a time to eulogize. His campaign for the poor must go on.